Lots going on as usual. Today is Monday, Easter Monday, April 21st, 2025, and the Pope is dead. Interesting. What timing? Unbelievable, really. It's very interesting. Klaus Schwab has stepped down as well. We're going to start with the Pope's death and the impact there. Poilievre wants to cut $10 billion from high-paid consultants, bringing it back to the same level as it was spending under Harper. And Poilievre dodges a handgun question. And the reporter says, hold on a second, you didn't answer the question. He says, yeah, next question. So it's quite funny. I've got the video for you on that one. Carney's fiscal plan was written for Trudeau and put together before Carney won the leadership and was placed there, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very interesting. And so I still have a pretty robust show today. It's the day after Easter. Usually not much happens in politics over this weekend, right? Unless they're trying to bury it. So anyway, lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Pope Francis is dead, and the President of Italy, Giorgio Meloni, says Pope Francis has returned to the house of the Father. This news saddens us deeply because a great man and a great pastor have left us. I had the privilege of enjoying his friendship, blah, 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 blah. Moving on. Sorry, I'm not a big Pope Francis fan. I don't know. I'm not to dance on the man's grave or anything like that, but the timing is interesting. It seems eyebrow raising, right? The day after Easter, man, wow. Because he seemed like he was coming back, right? He seemed like he was sick. He was in hospital for a while, and then he came back and gave some kind of announcement, and then boom, took a bad turn, I guess. The Daily Mail says, what happens now? Pope Francis has died. Period of official mourning begins with funeral set to take place within 6 days. And they say there will now be 9 days of official mourning, but the historic process of the conclave, where cardinals will gather in the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican to choose who will be the next pope, will not begin for at least 15 days from today. So that's news that's going to be pending, right? Very interesting things happening there. Pierre Poilievre is making some political hay from this. He says, I offer my deepest condolences to all Catholics on the passing of Pope Francis. His humility, compassion, and steadfast faith had a profound impact on millions of Canadians and others around the world from every faith background. We remember especially his historic parental pilgrimage to Canada, where he sought to begin a process of reconciliation by the Church with his apology for the evil committed by so many Christians against the Indigenous peoples. We join in thankful prayer with the Catholic faithful for his legacy of humble service and his message of love that will continue to inspire a world in need of hope. So there you go. That's Poilievre's point of view on everything there. I didn't see anybody else talking about it, but it is relatively new news, so I'm sure there will be. This is published at 4:00 in the morning, so it's possible that people haven't even seen it yet, right? So I woke up and I was kind of surprised by it as well. I didn't expect that news this morning, really. Kyle says Google did nothing for Easter again. Ramadan, check. Kwanzaa, check. Pride Month, check. The silence tells you how Google feels about Christians, right? Womp womp. Nothing for Easter, right? So, that's very, very interesting. The United Church celebrated Easter with a reimagined Last Supper, and I think the United Church is going to be used as the one world church, and if you're not on board with the United Church, it's going to be like heresy. Like, you are going to be unpersoned, and they're going to be real upset with you, et cetera, et cetera. And anyway, the Western Standard says United Church of Canada removes Jesus, features spiritual drag clown in bold reimagining of Last Supper. So happy Easter, says the United Church. Yikes. Not so good. Here is Klaus Schwab. Apparently, the news has been that Klaus Schwab is going to step down. And this is the first time that's been updated to has stepped down. Same day as the Pope's passing. Interesting. All of the timing seems interesting to me. Meaningful? Maybe, right? Is it meaningful this time of year? Yes, it is. So Steve says some good news this morning. Klaus Schwab steps down as the leader of the World Economic Forum after holding the position for 55 years. Weird and interesting timing. So all of that is a very interesting end to the Easter weekend. And gov.exe says, remember when the Liberals said they had to push back the election a week because it interfered with Diwali? It would have fallen on the same day as the beginning of Diwali, I think, or something to that effect. And They say, he continues, then they call a snap election and open the polling stations over Easter. More proof that every one of their excuses is bullshit. Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, oh man, we can't do anything because Diwali, right? But Easter's fine, right? No problem. Google doesn't do anything for Easter, but does things for everything else. All of that, very, very strange. Noticeable, right? Something that's eyebrow raising, if you ask me. So here is Daisy, and there've been a whole bunch of memes of people. This guy, right, the guy with his middle fingers up. There's a woman as well who looks ill. Somebody said, "What's wrong with Mike Myers?" I thought that was pretty funny. And so there's all these memes. This guy, somebody said, "What's wrong with Mike Myers?" I thought that's hilarious. Good job, brava. But all of these liberals look very, very like somebody's tainted their water or brainwashed them or something like that. This guy's lost his ever-loving mind. Like, you think this guy's probably, an accountant, maybe a reasonable guy in an everyday normal setting, but at a political rally, he starts behaving like this. And it's really, really strange. How did we get to a position where this is seen as acceptable by these Carney liberal rally attendees? Here we go.
Yeah, take my picture, dude.
Hey, don't touch me. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Don't touch me, dude. Don't touch me. You can't touch people you don't like. Thank you.
Take up my nostril.
Hey, get out of my face.
No,
get out
I'm
of
not
my
in your
face.
face, man.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not in your face.
Get out of my face.
Here.
Get out of my face.
Let me moon you, man.
Get out of my face, dude.
You're cool, man.
Dude,
how much you guys get
out
paid?
of my face.
Do you shave?
Get out of my face.
Do you have a job?
Get out of my face.
I'm not in your face.
Yes, you are. You touched me already. Don't touch me.
Get a cop.
Don't touch me.
Go help yourself. Get a cop.
Don't touch me.
Get a cop.
Don't touch me.
There's a cop
Sir,
right there.
take your medication.
No.
Take your medication.
No, go fuck your mother.
Take your medication.
Go fuck your mother.
Sir,
Go
calm down. Sir, calm down. Get out of my space. Get out of my space. Get out of my space. Jeez, man. Go take your meds.
That's pretty well the end of it. He then goes and says, that guy's crazy. And I mean, like, yeah, that's pretty aggressive. Like, that's a pretty aggressive thing to do, right? That's a weird thing to do. It's an aggressive thing to do. It's something that that it seems to me, my gut feeling is, he knows, the guy being aggressive, that if the person with the camera who he's being aggressive to loses his cool and like punches him or pushes him or something like that, the guy being aggressive would not have been charged with anything, where the guy who's responding to that aggression with aggression would then be charged. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why it seems like he knows that. And it seemed like I knew that too, watching it, right? That was his behavior. That's what it communicated to me. So the liberals are very, very weird. Here's Mark Carney, and Ryan says, this is unbelievably bad messaging. The fact that it resonates with anyone is disturbing. I have a feeling that I don't think that all of these people are political operatives, but I think that there are a lot of political operatives here. And I don't know what the crowd size looks like, but there are a lot of people chanting never 51st state, and Mark Carney seems prepped for these things, and he repeats these things into the microphone. So there's all sorts of, I mean, it's regular political rally stuff, but something to pay attention to anyway. Here we go.
This is the most consequential vote of our lifetimes, because President Trump has ignited a trade war that is ruptured. Like,
the crowd didn't respond to the word President Trump. They responded to the person yelling, right? Like, he said President Trump, and the crowd didn't say anything until the woman yelled. I just want to play it again, just because if they didn't like Trump, they'd respond to his name, but they didn't. They responded to the woman yelling.
Has ignited a trade war that is...
I didn't back it up too far. I didn't back it up far enough. Here we go. Just back it up just a little bit more. Here.
This is the most consequential vote of our lifetimes, because President Trump has ignited a trade war that is ruptured.
Too many beats. Like, there was too many beats. The crowd doesn't hate Trump. They responded to somebody directing them. Like, somebody put up an applause sign. It took a minute for it to register, and they caught up.
Ruptured. No, we don't like Trump here. Ruptured the global economy and changed forever our relationship with the United States. That old relationship is over, unfortunately. It never 51. It is a tragedy. but it's the new reality. And we're responding. We are responding.
This is the new reality, and it's Trump's fault for destroying our relationship, but it's over, and that's the new reality. That's a weird line of rhetoric. That's very, very strange, because without the United States, Canada would be in a bad situation. And I'm not convinced Mark Carney understands what he's talking about. And yeah, I think it's bad. I think it's bad rhetoric. I think it's bad communication. It's a bad strategy, and the audience is eating it up. And not to say I have a hard time believing that there's that many liberal supporters, but man, like there's something off about all this. There's something very, very strange about all of this. It seems like a pantomime. We're being sold this line, and it doesn't seem genuine. I don't know anybody who's this gullible. Regardless, Stephen Taylor says, Paul Wells says the Liberal platform is like a find and replace for taking out the word Justin Trudeau and replacing it with Mark Carney. That's actually exactly what they did. And I've got proof in the next tab. So here we go.
The Liberals have made a big part of this campaign distinguishing Mark Carney from Justin Trudeau. Does this platform release from them help or hurt that cause?
I don't think it helps them. So I guess it hurts them. It's an awfully liberal platform. It looks like they did a search and replace, took out every reference to a Justin Trudeau government, put in a Mark Carney government. And the changes that they do make, this odd two different accounting systems to deal with things that they call spending and things that they call investment, where spending is just a passing fancy, something that you to pay the groceries, and then investment is to build up capacity, infrastructure. I don't know if a lot of people really buy Mr. Carney's statement that he's going to spend less but invest more. I mean, that sounds like tricks I used to play with my own pocketbook when I was in university, right? I always ended up just spending more. And
I don't buy anything Mark Carney says. Like, I said yesterday, it's saying this isn't spending, it's an investment. It sounds like trying to convince your wife or significant other that this investment property and oceanfront in Arizona is totally a good deal, right? It's definitely not swampland. It's definitely not, right? But it's such a good deal, but we have to jump at it right now. No time to think about it, right? No. This is a bad idea, and Mark Carney's plan is a bad idea, and it seems like a bad idea, and he doesn't really have anything of substance to say, no, it's a really good idea. Here's some proof. Here's what I did before that worked. Nope, no, definitely not. Bradshaw says, here's Mona Fortier, who says this whole fiscal plan was set up before Mark Carney was the leader. Weird, right? Because you'd think that he'd want to have some kind of say in that, right? Or he really is just a puppet? Just dropping him in, right? Parachute this one in, see how he does. Here we go.
The Liberal platform, frankly, that's something I will say that has been ready for several weeks now. Mona Fortier was the one who was working on this, and it was ready before Mark Carney even became Liberal leader. So, he only had to tweak a couple of things. The Liberal platform.
He only had to tweak a couple of things. They directly find and replaced Justin Trudeau and put in Mark Carney instead. And Mona Fortier is the one who put it all together, right? So well before Mark Carney won leadership, it was all put together. He just, put across some details. He put a throw cushion on there, maybe a pillow, done and dusted. Here is Pierre Poilievre. He says, Mark Carney will cost you $130 billion more than Justin Trudeau. Is that the change you wanted? So this is kind of CPC, but it's a direct response to Mark Carney's
the Liberals promised to roll
fiscal stuff. I didn't push anything there. Ghosts in the machine. Gremlins. Here is Mark Carney's, here's all the coverage basically consolidated into a 1.5-minute video, and Pierre Poilievre is the one highlighting this. He says, is this really what you want? I don't think it's what anybody wants, but Pierre Poilievre also has his issues. Here we go.
The Liberals promised to roll out almost $130 billion in new spending.
$130 billion in new spending.
With the Liberal plan, which calls for $130 billion in new spending.
And it features big spending, but no timeline to fully balance the budget.
It certainly is a spend platform.
The cost of all the new measures the Liberals are proposing add up to $130 billion over
the price tag, $130 billion in new new spending over 4 years and an increased deficit, up to $62.3 billion this fiscal year.
Well, at almost $130 billion in new spending.
And would see the country run deeper deficits for the next 4 years.
Well, there are nothing but deficits in the 4-year forecast the Liberals have presented.
There's no plan to balance the overall budget.
The deficits in some ways get worse rather than better, and they're already pretty serious.
They're offering voters a lot of goodies based on borrowed money.
That the deficit spending is getting bigger, which frankly runs counter to some of Mark Carney's narrative about being a strong economic manager.
It's an awfully liberal platform. It looks like they did a search and replace, took out every reference to a Justin Trudeau government, put in a Mark Carney government.
But a lot of what we've heard in terms of how we pay for all these promises, all this spending, are things that we've heard before from Chrystia Freeland.
It did seem incredibly similar to the ideals that we've heard for the past decade, but not a lot of action on them.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, good video from the Poilievre campaign, and it doesn't even have conservative branding at the end. It's got paid for. It's got a little branding thing at the bottom there, so it is a campaign ad, but nothing like vote conservative or anything like that. It's just informational. Very interesting strategy shift. It's interesting to me that there are a lot of people who are really pushing back on this. Here's Dimitra, and he says, confidential brief to Canadians, my analysis of Mark Carney's fiscal framework. I spent Easter weekend, reading and analyzing Carney's proposed fiscal framework in detail. I hold an MBA in economics and finance, and before diving into the numbers, I also consulted with a few trusted economists. Together, we went through the plan with a fine-tooth comb. Here's what I found. Deficit to GDP ratio. Under this plan, the deficit to GDP ratio would rise by 65% by the final year. That's a significant and concerning increase. Debt to GDP ratio, based on my calculations, the debt to GDP ratio would hover around 42% throughout the entire horizon of the framework. So the first one was deficit to GDP. The second one is debt to GDP. Maybe I said deficit or debt at the beginning. I'm not sure. Anyway, the debt to GDP ratio would hover around 42% throughout the entire horizon of the framework, 42.4% in 28-29, instead of falling to 39.5% as the platform claims. That was one of the things I was saying yesterday as I was going through it, that it felt like they could put any number in there and I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to double check their math in any meaningful way because it doesn't look related in any real way. And it seems like they're using the math to obfuscate than to actually inform people how it all works. Back to this federal debt. Even factoring in the proposed savings, this plan would add $83 billion to the federal debt. Claimed new revenues and savings of $52 billion. But here's the issue. $20 billion of that is projected to come from new tariffs, which carry serious risks of trade retaliation and economic slowdown. Yeah. And they're saying they're going to take $20 billion more from Canadians and redistribute that? That's not good. Where's the other 30-odd billion going to come from? $28 billion comes from so-called government efficiency. Frankly, this is wishful thinking. That portion is almost entirely undocumented. So they say $20 billion is going to come from the taxes we collect on tariffs, and the other $30 billion is going to come from the efficiencies that we find. And we're not supposed to question that at all whatsoever. And when they don't hit that, like when they don't find $28 billion worth of government efficiencies, when that's just doesn't happen, they say, oops. And then they kick it down the road and they say, listen, we're going to find that if we're going to find those efficiencies this time. And they put that in their next costing thing. And it's dishonest, right? It's just dishonest. Unrealistic ambition, generating $28 billion in savings over 4 years, including $13 billion in the final year alone, is extremely ambitious. And frankly, it's hard to believe, especially coming from a government proposing dozens of new programs with no plan to scale back its footprint in provincial jurisdictions. Politically invisible measures. What struck me most was the sheer number of measures in this budget that no voter will see or understand during the campaign. Carney is tying his government's hands with technical behind-the-scenes commitments that are politically irrelevant, a puzzling choice. New spending, $130 billion. The platform outlines $130 billion in new measures over 4 years, which would increase the federal debt by $225 to $250 billion. Net zero by 2029 to 2039. A laudable goal. No. Net zero is like COVID zero. It's a stupid goal, and we should definitely throw people out of office who are trying for it. Yowza, a laudable goal. But the plan excludes infrastructure spending from the operating budget. These costs won't show up in the deficit, but they will add directly to the debt. Yes, this mirrors the model used in Quebec's plan, Québécois d'infrastructure. In theory, it can work, but only with strict oversight of capital investments. Otherwise, the debt will balloon far beyond projections. A credibility risk for Canada. An additional $250 billion in debt combined with a stagnant GDP to debt ratio would inevitably raise red flags with credit rating agencies. If risks eroding confidence in the long-term fiscal viability of the plan and of the government that implement it. Overly optimistic assumptions. The framework is built on economic assumptions that are frankly unrealistic in the context of potential economic slowdown triggered by tariffs and unplanned increases in spending if a recession hits. Conclusion, if this plan is implemented, credit agencies and markets may very well lose confidence, not just in the fiscal framework, but in the government itself. Mark Carney is the smartest guy we know, says Canadian Liberals. They don't have access to Hunter Biden, you see, right? Like that's the real problem. Table Salt says, Joe Biden says that Hunter Biden's the smartest guy you know. Never mind. Table Salt says, Chrystia Freeland quit out of protest because Justin Trudeau's budget was too costly. But then they parachuted in a central banker from the United Kingdom who is her son's godfather. And suddenly she's okay with a budget that has double the deficit? Wow, Chrystia Freeland. I don't believe that she's in it for, Canadians or anything like that. Holly Doan says CBC correspondent Rosie Barton broadcast misinformation and claiming to correct other media's misinformation, says CBC. Management issued a correction after Rosie Barton garbled facts in attempting to fault Drea Humphreys over potential burials. This is for First Nations Truth and Reconciliation stuff. Jonathan Kay says, wow, under corrections and clarifications, here it is, corrections and clarifications on the CBC, April 17th. Okay. And he's got an image of it, but I wanted the link. He says, CBC claims that Rosemary Barton was wrong when she said during a live April 16 broadcast that remains of Indigenous children had been discovered. And so they say on April 16, during a live broadcast following the French language federal election leaders debate on CBC News Network, chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton said, yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places across the country. As CBC News has reported on multiple occasions, what several Indigenous communities across Canada have discovered on the sites of some former residential schools are potential burial sites or unmarked graves. It doesn't explicitly say like there has not been remains found, because there have not been remains found. So that's a little bit of it's not quite there. It's like not far enough for me. I think like it's close, but no cigar, right? Like that saying starts with Monica Lewinsky, right? No? Riley says, Carney promises to stabilize in air quotes, annual permanent resident admissions at 1% of Canada's population. Hold on, quick back of the napkin math says 1% would be 420,000 per year, right? That's 42 million, 43 million, 420,000 per year. Excuse me. I said 42,000, 420,000 per year, not including foreign workers, students, and asylum seekers. So more than now? Lots more than now, but that's in Carney's plan as well. Nobody wants this plan. Nobody that I've talked to wants this plan. Nobody's saying this is a good plan. But all sorts of polls say anything that Carney does increases his support. Wild. Absolutely incredible. Here is Hunter, and he says, or she says, the Greenbelt limits all around the United Kingdom's major cities are not working. The cities must grow. And this guy says, mass immigration strangles domestic birth rates by increasing house prices and stagnating wages in certain sectors. Also, let's align our education system with the skills we actually need. Yeah, the education system is very, very bad. We also have green belts in Ontario. I don't know if there's green belts further across Canada. Sorry that I'm not up to snuff on that. That's kind of a provincial jurisdiction. So I know Ontario's situation with green belts, and it's stifled the GTA's growth. And maybe that's by design. It seems like that this is a plan rolled out by people that sounds really good, but in practice is actually bad for people. So not allowing the city to grow, what negative impacts does that have that we're unaware of, right? And what kind of negative economic impacts does that have as well? And this person is saying like, we shouldn't be importing migrants. We shouldn't be importing mass immigration, because what that does is puts pressure on the housing, and then pressure on the housing prevents people who grew up here in Canada, and in this example, the United Kingdom, from having their own children, because housing's too expensive. They can't afford it, and so they can't afford children, and so they don't have kids. So we import people who already have kids, or just have kids anyway, because the situation here is better than the situation they were already in. So man, there's all sorts of concerning implications about all of this, not least of all the impact the mass migration is having, not just on Canadian birth rates, but on like Western birth rates, right? We're importing the Middle East, or we're importing South Asian people, right? And what is that doing? In addition to introducing that into our birth pool, what is that doing to birth rates of the citizens who live here now? And why doesn't anybody care about that? Like, nobody cares about that. That's like racist to talk about or something. Pretty wild stuff, right? Here's Juno news, and Mark Carney is the same as Pierre Poilievre. Everybody wants to build homes, right? Everybody's talking about building homes. Everybody, like conservatives, liberals. So this is back-to-back home building. Juno News is reporting this one on Mark Carney. Carney is promising to change the future of home building, and everybody will get to help enrich Brookfield for Mark Carney, right? By championing prefabricated and modular homes. But housing experts are doubtful that the policy will address Canada's housing crisis. I'm getting sick of experts. I think that we're going to have to start naming people. Mike Holmes says it's doubtful that this policy will address Canada's housing crisis, because then you can put context, right? But an expert could be anything, right? Mike Holmes is a housing expert, but he may not be the fiscal housing expert, like the right guy to talk about Canada's housing crisis. Your expert matters, right? Like, anyway, here's the CPC and what they're doing with regards to, oh my gosh, we're 27 minutes already. CPC says, or CPC, Pierre Poilievre is talking about homes as well. And he says a new conservative government will build 2.3 million new Canadian homes in the next 5 years. To get there, we will axe the sales tax on homes, cut development charges, sell off federal land, and require cities build 15% more homes. Vote for change. Vote to build homes you can afford. Vote conservative. Yeah, I just feel like all those homes are going to go to foreigners. I feel like that doesn't solve the problem. I feel like it would be a way better idea to stop. I'm saying too much. To stop bringing in. It's very similar to Mark Carney's, so I'll stop. But it's very similar to not solving the problem. All we'd have to do is turn off the immigration, right? Shut down the immigration, and then we wouldn't need to build the homes. We would just have the homes, because people would be going back to their country, and then the homes would be freed up, right? And so, but one of the problems with that is the home values may decrease, and the boomers don't like that. And so if the Conservatives promised to do that, there would be economic turmoil, because if you thought your house was worth $1 million and you were going to retire on it, and then I found out that your house is actually worth $500,000 because the demand is so low and the housing prices have fallen because nobody's coming in anymore and the pressure's off completely, then people get upset, right? So and I mean, I'm not surprised by any of that, right? So it's a balancing act that Pierre Poilievre is saying, yeah, we're going to build our way out of this. But again, I get frustrated because it feels like we're going to build homes for foreigners. We're going to build homes for people who are being imported in, so we don't crash our economy. And I feel like we have played this game terribly wrong. And now we have to play the hand we're dealt, but the hand we're dealt is kind of crappy too, and nobody's being straight up with us about how bad the hand is. Here's Jared, and he says, Poilievre vows to cut the federal government's budget for consultants by $10 billion. In 21, it was $15 billion. In 24, I think it was $22 billion. I think Harper was $5 billion, but I'm not sure. I'm just basing that on $10 billion off of the 2021 numbers. But I saw some other newspaper articles talking about how 2022, 23, or 23, 24 was $22 billion for consultants. So if you take $10 billion off the $22 billion, it's $11 billion. And that's still pretty high for consultants. I'd love a hard ceiling on consultants. And I'd love to understand why we need to spend, if it's $5 billion on consultants, why do we need to spend 5? If it's 10, why 10? Like, what's the rationale here? Do we not have anybody who knows anything about anything? Like, maybe we should prioritize expertise if we don't have anybody who can do anything in the House of Commons. Here's Poilievre talking about this. Oh, maybe this is... Yeah, this is the federal budget cuts for consultants. So hold on, we'll do it. We'll start from the beginning. Here we go. I had it queued up for the dodging the handgun question, but that's not this one. Here we go.
To be very specific about it, I'm going to address the inflated cost of consultants, which have gone up over 100% during the lost Liberal decade, costing the average family today well over $1,000 in federal taxes just to pay for consultants. Can you imagine that? You're spending over $1,000 in federal taxes just to pay for consultants. This is insane. And that's why I'm announcing today I will cut the federal government's budget for consultants by $10 billion, bringing it back to the level it was under Stephen Harper. $10 billion less for high-priced consultants means $10 billion less inflation, means $10 billion more affordable life for Canadians. To be very
so he's just kind of muddy on how much it's going to. 10 billion off, but it'll be 17 billion. Well, that's not actually 10 billion off, right? Like, I don't know, man. This is the reference for the amount. It says the $1 billion addiction to consultants in government. And so 2021-22, the revelation that the Canadian government spent $15 billion on consultants on 21-22 has dogged Prime Minister Trudeau all through 2023. And then I've seen other ones that were more up to date. So it seems like it seems like a lot of money on consultants that I don't know that we get value out of that. I don't know that that's a value. That sometimes it's valuable to spend that money because you're going to cut off all the time it takes for you to learn all of those things. If you can bring in an expert and they can say, well, here's your problem, do this and do this and do this, right? Or if they've got tools that you need that you can't buy or easily replicate, that makes sense too, right? If you've got to get a raccoon out of your attic, right? Sure, you could grab the raccoon and like throw it out of your attic, but it's going to climb back in there unless you do other things, right? And so sometimes it's good to hire an expert and he's got a one-way door, right? But then if I'm the person paying for this, I want to see an itinerary, a receipt, an itemized receipt of like this and this and this, like a one-way door, animal extraction and removal, all that kind of stuff. And then I'd have a better idea of how the money's being spent. But like the way it is, we're just kind of being bilked, it seems. Experts abound, right? Oh, we needed an expert to do this. And it's like, well, I don't know that you did. And a lot of it is expert advice. And that's, even worse. And the ArriveCan stuff, further, some of the financial things that are traded seem like insiders giving other insiders payoffs, right? And so that's problematic. And then when they get called out for asking for the receipts, they shut down Parliament instead of hand over the receipts. That's weird. So it was Easter weekend and the Conservatives are out for Vishaki. And this is Pierre Poilievre. And so it's, right, this is part and parcel of what Canada is. This is, a lot of people really support Pierre Poilievre and they want him to be the next leader. So this is weird, right? It's a little weird.
Good to see you guys. Hi there. Great to see you. Great to see you. Happy Visaki. Good to see you guys. Happy Visaki. Happy Visaki.
So there you go. It's weird, right? Is that weird? I didn't see him out at any Easter parades. Here is Pierre Poilievre dodging questions around handguns. And the question was at the beginning, but I feel like this is the better bit to show you because he talks about how anybody can get a handgun and handguns are really accessible and so on and so forth. And then she says, but you didn't answer the question. Here you go. I hope it's loud enough. Here you go.
Thank you.
Next question.
The question is that, are you going to keep in place the handgun ban or not?
Sorry. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Next question.
Good morning. Sonia West, Sanja.
You didn't answer the question. Are you going to keep in place the handgun ban that was put in place under Justin Trudeau? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Next question. So that's pretty wild stuff. In spite of all that, very popular still, and Pierre Poilievre racks up another endorsement. Quebec Union of Electricians wants change, endorses Conservatives. And he says, thanks Guy Fournier and Quebec International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 568 for backing our plan to cut income tax by 15% and train 350,000 workers who will build. So politics as usual, says the CPC. One of the things that the PPC is reporting is there are a lot of people who are being told that if you don't mark your ballot with the correct writing utensil, I think they want a pen or pencil, it won't count. And so people are reporting this to CPC or PPC candidates, and a PPC candidate, Michael Bayer, I think he's a candidate. Candidate right there. He says, I got a call last evening from voters who went to the advanced polls. They were told by Election Canada employees that it was a federal law that they must use pencil to mark the ballot. This is blatantly false information. The reports came from the Aaron Center Middle School location. No idea how many other locations are spreading this false information. This was reported to the assistant returning officer and the supervisor at the location after I cast my ballot marked in pen last night before the polls closed at 9 p.m. On April 18th, 19, 20, and 21, local Elections Canada offices are open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then Elections Canada has responded to this. It says, by law, Elections Canada must provide electors with a black lead pencil to mark their ballot. However, there's nothing in the law that prevents an elector from marking their ballot with a pen or a pencil that they bring with them from the polling place. With them to the polling place. So right, like that's interesting stuff. Why that kind of misinformation happening? I don't know. It seems very strange. Lots going on. It seems like a washing machine, and the two main candidates seem very, very similar in a lot of their approaches, from their approach to tariffs to their approach to housing building and all the rest. So it's very concerning, and I hope that we're able to navigate through this in the most profitable way for Canadians, right? But even if we do that, it seems like we're going to send all our money to Ukraine anyway. So, want, because that's what both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre want, and that's bad. So anyway, we got to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll carry on with the... Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to canadapoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful